There's a line between victim and villain, and sometimes it blurs so much you can't tell where it ends or begins. This is one of those stories. One where a young girl abandoned, abused, and pushed to the edges of society grows up to become something most of us fear: a killer. But not just any killer, one of America's most infamous female serial killers. Her name, Aileen Wuornos. This is True Crime Echoes, where we don't just revisit crimes, we listen to the stories that echo long after the headlines fade. Chapter 1. Opening Hook. America's Female Monster. Hi there. Welcome back to True Crime Echoes. I'm really glad you're here with me today because this one has stuck with me for a while. It's disturbing, complicated, and honestly, I still don't know how to feel about it. You've probably heard the name Aileen Wuornos. The media labeled her America's first female serial killer, and her face has been plastered across mugshots, documentaries, court footage. She became infamous. But what's behind that reputation? What made Aileen, Aileen, I used to think I had her figured out. A monster, a cold-blooded killer. But then I started digging into her story, and what I found, it's not that simple. It never is. Is it? Now, just a quick heads up before we go further. This story contains some really dark content. Sexual abuse, child neglect, assault, murder. So please take care of yourself. If you're not in the headspace for that today, I completely understand. But if you're still with me, let's begin. Aileen Wuornos. Born on a leap year, February 29th, 1956. A woman who never really stood a chance. I don't say that to excuse anything she did, trust me, there's a lot. But her life started with pain, and it just kept going. She never met her father, never knew what love looked like, and by the time she was a teenager, she was homeless, alone, and selling her body just to survive. Still, it's what happened years later that shocked everyone. Between 1989 and 1990, Aileen murdered 7 men across Florida. 7. Shot left on roadsides or in woods. All of them found with multiple gunshot wounds. When she was caught, she claimed self-defense, said they tried to rape her while she was working as a sex worker. But here's the thing. Some of them were convicted sex offenders. Others were seemingly ordinary men. So who's telling the truth? And how do you tell the difference between a victim who's lashing out and a killer who's lost all control? This case isn't just about murder. It's about trauma justice, revenge, survival, and maybe even love. Because yes, there's also a love story in here. Aileen's relationship with a woman named Tyra Moore ended up being one of the biggest twists in this case: the betrayal. You'll see. Aileen's life became a national obsession. A woman serial killer, that alone made headlines. But the more I learned about her, the more I started to ask myself, was she a cold-blooded predator, or just the product of a life filled with unimaginable pain? I don't have all the answers, but I do have the story, and today I want to tell you her story, not the Hollywood version, not the tabloid spin, but the story of a girl abandoned, a woman feared, and a name that still makes people flinch. So let's go back to the beginning, before the mugshots, before the killings, back to where it all started. Chapter 2, Left Behind, Broken. Early growing up. I never really understood what it meant to have a normal childhood. I never met my father. He was in and out of trouble long before I was born, and by the time I came into this world, he was already locked away. What I would later learn about him? Well, it was horrifying. He wasn't someone you'd ever want near a child. In fact, not near anyone. My mother, she was just a teenager when she had me. I imagine she tried her best, or at least I want to believe she did. But by the time I was 4, she left. She dropped me and my older brother off at our grandparents' house and never came back. No note, no goodbye, just gone. I remember the confusion, the waiting, the slow realization that this wasn't temporary, that we'd been left behind. Eventually, my grandparents legally adopted us, and from the outside, maybe it looked like a second chance. But inside that house, it was something else entirely. Our home was filled with silence and shouting with shadows that moved even when no one else did. My grandfather, he was a man with demons. He drank, he raged, and he didn't care who got caught in the storm. I spent most of my early years trying to stay out of his way, which was nearly impossible. By the time I was 11, I was already slipping through the cracks. I wasn't a child anymore, not really. I was surviving, trading what I could to get by things no child should ever have to trade. I remember the looks from classmates, the whispers, the judgment. But none of them knew what it was like to go home to a place that never felt safe. School streets abandoned lots, those felt more predictable than the place I laid my head at night. My brother and I, we coped in different ways. Some of it was quiet, some of it, not so much. There are things I'll never fully explain. Maybe I don't want to. When I was 14, something happened that changed everything. I became pregnant. It wasn't by choice. It wasn't love. It was another act of power against a girl who already had none. They sent me away to a place for girls like me. I gave birth there quietly and the baby was taken. I never held them, never knew where they went. Just like that, a chapter closed before it even began. After I came back, my grandmother, who had always been the quieter one in the house, died. Liver failure, they said. I remember thinking, she was the only one who ever looked at me like I mattered, even just a little. And now she was gone too. I dropped out of school not long after. At 15, I was kicked out of the house for good. My grandfather didn't want me there anymore. My brother and I went separate ways, and I ended up living in the woods near our town, alone. Nights were cold, days were long. I did what I had to do just to eat, just to survive. I walked streets most people were too afraid to drive through. I trusted strangers because there was no one else to trust. I learned fast. I learned hard. From the outside, maybe people saw a runaway girl, a delinquent, a problem. But inside, I was just a kid, abandoned, twice hurt, in ways no one ever saw, trying to find something, anything that felt like safety. That was my beginning, and it only got darker from there. Chapter 3. Trouble finds her first. By the time Aileen turned 18, she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was spiraling. And honestly, it was only a matter of time before trouble found her. Or maybe it's more accurate to say she found it first. In 1974, she was arrested in Colorado. The charges: driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing a gun from a moving vehicle. I mean, firing a gun while driving. That's not your average teenage rebellion. That's chaos in motion. And of course, she didn't show up for court. So add failure to appear to the list. It was like the beginning of a pattern: get in trouble, get caught, skip the consequences, and keep moving. 2 years later, in 1976, Aileen hitchhiked her way to Florida, where she met a man who could not have been more opposite from her. His name was Louis Gratz Fell, and he was 69 years old, the president of a local yacht club. Yeah, yacht club president. And here comes 20-year-old Aileen, with no money, no job, and a criminal record. But somehow they hit it off, fast. They got married that same year. Now listen, I don't want to sound judgy, but it wasn't exactly a fairy tale romance. Aileen was still getting into fights constantly, especially at bars. That seemed to be her comfort zone. She'd drink, get angry, start fights, and before long, the police were involved. And then she assaulted Louis with his own cane. Yeah, his cane. He filed a restraining order against her just a few weeks into their marriage. That's how fast things fell apart. After that, she headed back to Michigan, where she kept the chaos going. She got into yet another bar fight. This time she threw a cue ball at a bartender's head. And honestly, it's hard to tell if she even cared. She seemed to be looking for trouble, or maybe just so used to it that she didn't know how to live without it. Then came another huge blow. Her brother Keith died of cancer. He left her $10,000 from his life insurance. And for a moment, it probably felt like a fresh start. But Aileen didn't really know how to handle money. She spent that 10 grand in less than 2 months. She bought a car, wrecked it, paid off some fines, the rest gone. Just like that. By 1981, she was back in Florida, and this time she wasn't just causing fights, she was committing armed robbery. She held up a convenience store at gunpoint and walked out with $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. That's it. She was caught almost immediately. And when asked about it later, Aileen admitted she was sloppy, like she didn't even care if she got caught. And maybe that was the point. I read something once that stuck with me. Women living on the streets sometimes purposely get caught just to have a place to sleep. Prison for them means food, a bed, a toilet, a kind of twisted version of safety. I don't know if that was Aileen's mindset, but it wouldn't surprise me. She spent a year in prison for the robbery, and just days after her release, she was arrested again, this time for trying to cash forged checks at a bank. It became a revolving door of charges: grand theft, auto obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, illegal firearms robbery. The list kept growing. And then, in 1986, Aileen met Tyra Moore. It was at a gay bar in Daytona Beach. Tyra, who went by Ty, was a hotel maid. Quiet, soft-spoken, and something about her pulled Aileen in. They moved in together almost immediately. Aileen worked the streets doing sex work to support them both. And Ty. She seemed to give Aileen something she'd never had before: a reason to stay grounded, or at least the illusion of one. But even with Ty in her life, Aileen couldn't stop the downward spiral. If anything, it gave her more to protect and more to lose. And that's when things started turning deadly. Chapter 4, Love on the Run. You know, for someone who'd been abandoned, beaten, exploited, and left to fend for herself from such a young age, Aileen still longed for connection. She still wanted to feel loved, needed even. And in 1986, she met someone who finally gave her a taste of that. Her name was Tyra Moore, but everyone called her Ty. They met at a gay bar in Daytona Beach, and Aileen, by this point, already hardened by years of survival, let her guard down. Ty was younger, working as a hotel maid, and seemed to offer something Aileen never really had: a sense of stability. And in return, Aileen gave her everything. They quickly became inseparable, moved in together, lived like they were soulmates on the fringe of society. Aileen even took on the role of provider, funding their lifestyle through sex work so Ty wouldn't have to work as much. She wanted to protect her, take care of her, build something close to a normal life, or at least their version of it. But life with Aileen was far from peaceful. Bar fights, arguments, frequent run-ins with the law, and every time Aileen got in trouble, Ty was there, sometimes as a witness, sometimes to vouch for her, sometimes to help cover her tracks. Aileen saw Ty as her ride or die, the one person who wouldn't leave, the one person who stayed. But here's where things start to shift. Aileen was no longer just surviving, she was spiraling. Her petty crimes were becoming more dangerous, more reckless. She was robbing stores, forging checks, getting violent. But she always came back to Ty, playing the role of protector, the breadwinner. Some people believe that Ty knew more than she ever admitted. Others believe she was in the dark. Personally, I don't know how you share a motel room every night with someone and not sense that something's off, that they're slipping into something darker. But either way, their love story wasn't sweet. It was codependent, built on desperation and survival. Aileen wasn't just in love, she was clinging to the only person who didn't abandon her. And that made her dangerous. By late 1989, the tension was growing. The crimes were getting bolder. And underneath it all, you could feel it: something was going to snap. Aileen's anger, her trauma, her fear of losing Ty, it was all simmering just beneath the surface. Then it happened. She crossed the line from theft and assault to murder. 7 men over the course of a year, and Ty. She was still right beside her, motel to motel, night to night, step by step. They were running from something even they didn't fully understand. Maybe Aileen thought she was protecting them both. Maybe she believed what she was doing was necessary. But one thing's for sure, this wasn't just Aileen's story anymore. It was their story. And soon it would all come crashing down. Chapter 5. The killings begin. You know how people say that everything can change in a single moment? For Aileen, that moment came in late 1989. Up until then, she had a long list of offenses: petty theft, assault, forgery, car theft. Nothing that would make headlines. But when she crossed the line into murder, it wasn't just a new crime. It was a transformation. A turning point she could never walk back from. The first victim, his name was Richard Mallory. He was a 51-year-old electronics store owner from Clearwater, Florida. Aileen would later claim that he picked her up while she was working, and somewhere in that transaction, things went very wrong. She said he assaulted her, tried to rape her, that she acted in self-defense. That part of the story became the center of a lot of debate. Richard's body was found in a wooded area, shot multiple times, including 2 bullets straight through his left lung. A violent, messy death. His car was missing, his belongings gone. And Aileen vanished into the Florida backroads like a ghost. But here's the thing, Richard Mallory wasn't just some random guy. Turns out he was a convicted rapist. He had a criminal record, one that added a layer of complexity to Aileen's claim of self-defense. Some people believed her, others didn't. But whether or not that first killing was justified in her mind, what followed was no accident. Over the course of the next 12 months, 6 more men were murdered. Each one shot, each one left in remote areas, sometimes stripped, sometimes abandoned, with nothing but tire tracks and bloodstains behind. There was a pattern forming, and law enforcement began to notice. The second victim was David Spears, a 47-year-old construction worker, shot 6 times, his body dumped along a highway. Then came Charles Carskadden, a 40-year-old part-time rodeo worker. Aileen shot him 9 times. That kind of overkill. That wasn't about escape. That was rage. Another man, Troy Barres, a sausage salesman, went missing and was later found shot twice in a wooded area. Then there was Charles Dick Humphreys, a retired Air Force major and former police chief, killed and left by the road. By now, police were connecting the dots. They found abandoned vehicles. Witnesses remembered seeing 2 women driving them. One of those women, scruffy, aggressive, unpredictable, fit Aileen's description, and the other, quiet, nervous, always in the background. Ty. More pawnshop records began surfacing, items that once belonged to the victims, and with them, fingerprints. Aileen's fingerprints. One of the victims, Peter Seams, was never found, but his car was, and in it, Aileen's palm print, clear as day, on the inside door handle. The most chilling part to me personally is how routine it became. She'd go out at night, do her work, and if something went wrong, if she felt threatened or just needed the money, she reached for the gun. She was spiraling, and Ty. She was still there, still with her. Whether she knew everything or not is still up for debate. But they were together, motel to motel, night after night, and each time Aileen killed, she came back with less fear, less hesitation. It was like the darkness inside her had taken over completely. She said later that it was always about self-defense, that the men attacked her, that she had no choice. But 7 times, that's not survival anymore. That's a pattern. That's a mission. And the scary thing, it was working for a while. Until one night, a simple car accident in a quiet Florida neighborhood would blow it all open and bring her face to face with the end. But we'll get to that. Chapter 6. Confessions. Trials and the final sentence. They caught me at a bar. Of all places, it was a biker bar called The Last Resort. Fitting right, I was just there trying to keep low, but the past finally caught up to me. The cops didn't come in guns blazing or anything dramatic. Just quiet. They had a warrant. I didn't fight it. Ty wasn't with me when they arrested me. She had already left, said she couldn't handle the motel-to-motel life anymore. That part hurt, even if I understood. What I didn't expect, though, was that they'd find her all the way in Pennsylvania. She ran far, and then they used her. They told Ty she could walk away free if she helped them, if she could get me to confess. And she did. They set her up in a motel, wired the phone, and had her call me, like nothing had changed. I should have known something was off, but I loved her. I wanted to protect her. So when she begged me to clear her name, I did. 3 days of calls, and finally I gave them what they wanted. I said the words. I admitted to it all. I told her it was self-defense, that I didn't have a choice. And maybe at the time I believed that. Or maybe I just needed anyone to hear my side before they made up their minds. After that, everything moved fast. The media exploded. A woman serial killer, a lesbian, people were obsessed. I was no longer a person, I was a headline, a punchline, a monster. They played every angle they could, dissected every piece of my past, every scar, every poor decision. I did interviews from jail. Some days I sounded calm, almost put together. Other days, not so much. The weight of it all, the judgment, the labels it got to me. But what really stuck with me was how quickly the world decided who I was. No one wanted to understand how I got there. They just wanted someone to blame. The trial came in '92. Actually, there were several. One for each man. One for each death. Each time I sat there alone while the courtroom whispered and pointed. Ty testified against me. That part. That cut deeper than anything. I kept thinking after everything she really left me like this. The stories I told during the trial, they changed. Sometimes I said it was self-defense. Other times I admitted it was robbery. Sometimes I said I wanted no witnesses. The truth. The lines had blurred so badly in my head, I didn't even know anymore. All I knew was that I'd spent so long just trying to survive. And this was where it brought me. In the end, they gave me 6 death sentences. Not 1. 6. Like they wanted to make sure there was no way out. I sat in that prison cell for years. Appeals came and went. Lawyers tried to paint me as mentally unstable. But I knew what I was doing. And eventually, I said it loud and clear, I was done. I didn't want to fight anymore. I told the court to stop the appeals. I told them I was ready. I killed those men, I said. Cold as ice. I'd do it again. Maybe that was anger talking. Maybe that was me reclaiming some sort of control after a life of being powerless. Or maybe I just wanted it to end. They granted my request. Chapter 7. The Final Hours and What Remains by 2002. I was tired. Tired of the headlines, tired of the cages, tired of people calling me crazy when I knew exactly what I was doing. I told the court I didn't want any more lawyers, no more appeals. I didn't want to waste anyone's time, not theirs, not mine. I was ready to go. People thought I was losing it when I said I had hate crawling through my system. But it was true. I was angry. Angry at the men who hurt me. Angry at the system that never protected girls like me. Angry that all anyone could see was the monster I'd become, not the broken person I'd always been. I told them I wasn't insane. That I knew right from wrong. That I had killed those men cold as ice. And that I'd probably do it again. Was that the truth? Or just a final act of defiance? Maybe both. They scheduled my execution for October 9th, 2002. I didn't ask for a last meal, just a cup of black coffee. Simple, bitter, honest, kind of like me. And then there, I was standing on the edge of my own story, about to close it for good. My final words, yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back. Weird, I know. But at that point, what did I have to lose? At 9:47 a.m., I was gone. I became the 10th woman executed in the United States since capital punishment was reinstated in 1976, the second in Florida. And even after death, my story didn't end. They made movies, wrote books. Charlize Theron even won an Oscar playing me in Monster. People studied me like some dark mystery they wanted to solve. Some saw me as a symbol of female rage. Others just saw a murderer. But here's the thing. I was never just one thing. I was a little girl abandoned by her mother, a teenager abused by her grandfather, a woman who lived in the woods, sold her body to survive, and trusted the wrong people. I was angry, yes, but I was also scared. I was tough, but I was also shattered. Some say I was evil, others say I was a product of evil. Maybe both are true. In the end, I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope that someone somewhere hears my story and looks a little deeper the next time they see a girl falling through the cracks. Because monsters aren't born. They're made. Aileen Wuornos didn't ask for pity. She didn't beg for mercy. In fact, she walked into the chamber where her life would end with the same raw intensity she carried through all her years. But what do we make of someone like her? Was she just a murderer? Or was she also a mirror showing us the cracks in a system that failed her over and over again? Thanks for staying with me through this story. If it left you thinking, questioning, or even uncomfortable, good. That's what true crime is supposed to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode if you found it thought-provoking. And if you have thoughts, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe. This is True Crime Echoes.